don't know whether this is politically motivated, although obviously there are some indications that it could be.
All right, I would say if one of the demands of the gunman holding hostages is for an ISIS flag, it's at least politically motivated, if not religiously motivated. Joining us now, the Malzberg panel, the host of the Roger Hedgecock syndicated radio show, and that would be Roger Hedgecock, and columnist with Breitbart.com and the American Thinker, and author of WTF, How Rove and the Establishment Lost Again. See Edmund Wright. And let's go to Roger. Roger, you know, I laughed as I watched the BBC coverage. They had it before anybody else last night, and they kept warning us, even though that Islamic flag was in the window being held up by the hands of the hostages, saying Allah is the only way. They kept cautioning us not to jump to conclusions.
It's the same old head in the sand denial process of liberals everywhere, and apparently it's infected some of the officials in Australia. It has not affected Australian public opinion, by the way. This guy was already infamous for sending letters to the members of the deceased soldiers from Afghanistan, Australian soldiers who died in battle, sending letters to their relatives saying that the soldiers had been murderers. So it's a Westboro Baptist kind of guy in a Shia clothing, and he's also been very famous for his videos denouncing Australia. I mean, he moves there as a refugee from Iran in 1996, and then becomes a self-styled sheikh and an imam and all this kind of stuff. It's obviously another Muslim gone anti-Western crazy, and the site of this cafe is also important. It's in a building that houses the Federal Reserve Bank for Australia. It's down the street from the Premier's office, the governor of that area, and it's right by the Sydney Opera House and a lot of banks. So he chose an area that apparently was going to get as high profile for his views as possible, and then paste this sign in the window, "There's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet." It's pretty clear to me what happened.
Yeah, and Edmund, you know, he had two demands. He wanted an ISIS flag, and he wanted to speak to the Prime Minister. It just seems to me, you know, there's no way to prevent this. Once the loonies are out there and allowed to operate, there's got to be a way, maybe there's not, maybe to stop the loonies from getting out there. And I don't know what that is.
Well, Steve and Roger, you guys are off base. This is just more workplace violence, right? I will say this. It sounds like, I don't know if it was the Australian Prime Minister or who that soundbite was coming in. Pardon me for not knowing.
It was, yes.
All right, well, he's not where he needs to be, but he's still ahead of President Obama and General Casey with regard to Fort Hood. Not to mention Diane Sawyer, who was all upset that Major Hassan was not Major Smith, if you remember. It amazes me how these liberals walk around. You know, they remind me of these clueless parents at one of these no-score league, little league games where every child in the dugout knows the score, and the parents are up there congratulating themselves and no one knows the score. But the score at Fort Hood was Jihadist 13, Fort Hood nothing, and everybody knew it, and everyone in Australia knows the score here as well. Maybe some adults will admit it.
Absolutely. And Roger, isn't it true that Australia has one of the, that nobody has a gun? Didn't they come and confiscate everybody's gun at one point?
Yes, they did. And now, of course, we know the obvious result of that. And it's quite clear that what we've got to do is cling to our, as Obama charged us with doing, we have to cling to our Second Amendment and our Bible, but we have to cling to that Second Amendment as this first line of defense against something like this disrupting your morning coffee, for crying out loud.
Yeah, Edmund, he's right. Cling to your guns, and also cling to your God while you're at it too.
Yeah, well, you know, that's what the founding fathers did. They clung to their guns, they clung to God, they clung to cigarettes, they clung to meat. They were white guys. I guess they were just totally wrong.
Yeah, and of course, white guys, the ultimate sin today. Nothing worse than an old white guy who's a Republican. You hear the media say it over and over with such disgust and disdain. All right, stay where you are. We're coming back with part 2 of the Roger Hedgecock and C. Edmund Wright panel. I want to talk about the vote in the UN, which is coming up this week in the United States, saying they may not veto the Palestinian request for statehood. We have that, and we also have Yes, Jeb Bush saying he would make a good president, and Elizabeth Warren may be giving a clue that indeed she will run against Hillary. All that straight ahead right here on the Steve Malzberg Show, only on Newsmax Television. All right, folks, we're back with the Malzberg panel, part 2. Roger Hedgecock, host of the nationally syndicated Roger Hedgecock radio show, and Breitbart.com columnist, also American Thinker columnist. C. Edmund Wright, of course, his book is WTF, How Karl, Rove, and the Establishment Lost Again. All right, guys, we heard today from our top of the hour news with John Bachman that Kerry has met with Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu fully expects the United States to use their veto at the UN over any attempt for the Palestinians to get authorization for speeded up statehood recognition. It's always been American policy that comes through the negotiation table. And I see the yahoo.com story here that Washington, a.k.a. Obama, is undecided as to whether or not the U.S. will use their resolution to veto, or their veto on the resolution. They're hoping, I think, that there's not enough support aside from the U.S. so that they won't have to use the veto. I am not surprised. Roger, nothing this man does with regard to Israel, a country he despises, would surprise me.
This administration is intent on coddling our enemies and punishing our friends, and it's clear in Israel that Israel's at the top of that list of punishing our friends. What Kerry is trying to do today in Rome and later tomorrow in meetings with the Palestinians in London is to try to get them to back off a little bit of a set timetable, try to get the Europeans to back off of trying to recognize Palestine at the United Nations, and trying to get everybody back to the table to start talking. American leadership here is so devoid of meaning anymore that obviously the Europeans are going their own way, Palestinians are going their own way. The whole United Nations has become a corrupt, out of control situation in which America has very little influence. And I think Obama has planned it this way in order to get to a point where he's going to pressure, and he's trying to take Netanyahu out of office in these March elections, don't mistake that.
Absolutely.
Try to pressure Israel to try to get into a position of capitulation and going back to the 67 borders, which, as Netanyahu pointed out, would bring the jihadists to the suburbs of Tel Aviv and in the neighborhoods of Jerusalem.
Well, I got to tell you, if Obama sends his cronies to get involved in this election, as I'm sure he will, anything could happen. What do you think, Edmund?
Yeah, well, yeah, the Chicago way. What I like, though, is that Netanyahu's coming out and just basically saying the U.S. has promised that this is not going to happen. I don't know if that's what John Kerry told him or not, but I believe that's very, very wise posturing on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu. And as Roger said, this president coddles our enemies and punishes our friends. Well, that's because those are his enemies are our friends, and vice versa. I mean, he's got the wrong set of enemies.
I got it. Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right, and that extends, and I'm with the crowd that believes that everything that this man does has a purpose. Nothing's by accident. He knows what he's getting, and he's getting what he wants, and it's not by accident. So let's leave it at that. Now let's move on. Elizabeth Warren has excited her base, her followers, by saying over and over during an interview with NPR that I am not running for president. She said it 4 times, and it's in the present tense. She not once said, I will not run for president. Edmund, do you think she's actually going to run? I mean, she almost led a filibuster against this spending bill.
Isn't it ironic we're talking about the wife of Bill Clinton maybe parsing words with regards to whether or not she's going to run? She's definitely the far left loony bin fringe of the Democrat Party. She's probably the only Democrat that, say, Jeb Bush could beat.
Yeah, that could be. What about it, Roger?
Well, Elizabeth Warren is going to run because the lunatic left is going to demand that she run because they are very suspicious of Hillary Clinton and the Clintons in general as being much too centrist for them. So it's going to be interesting to see if Elizabeth Warren can pull off in 2016 what Barack Obama did in 2008, and that is to take away the inevitability of Hillary Clinton.
And what a place in history that would be for Hillary Clinton. I think a rightful place. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you both very much. Roger Hedgecock, C. Edmund Wright. We'll speak to you both again very soon. And up next, it's Give Me 5. And I promise you're not going to want to miss it on the Steve Malzberg Show.